Imagine closing your eyes at night and finding yourself sinking into a vast, dark ocean. The water is heavy, pressing in from every side, endless in its depth. In the dream, there is no shore, no light, only the growing dread of being pulled further into the unknown. Suddenly, from the deep, a massive shadow looms. A giant fish, mouth wide, emerges and swallows you whole. The panic is overwhelming, the sensation of being consumed total. You awake gasping, heart racing, convinced you have seen some omen of death or misfortune. Yet when this dream was brought to Carl Jung, he did not see it as a curse or a sign of doom. To him, it was a sacred invitation. The descent into the sea and the swallowing by the great fish were not punishments, but symbols of returning to the womb of the unconscious, a place where the old self dissolves so that a new self may be born. Jung often reminded his patients that dreams rarely speak in plain words. Instead, they communicate through images, scenes, and symbols, strange and sometimes frightening pictures that carry meanings deeper than logic can touch. This story of the sea and the fish became one of his clearest illustrations of how symbolism works in the psyche. It shows us that what at first feels like destruction may in fact be transformation. What feels like being devoured may instead mean being prepared for rebirth. When we encounter symbols of water in dreams, oceans, rivers, floods, we are stepping into one of humanity's oldest metaphors. Water is both danger and life, both drowning and cleansing. To fall into the sea is to lose control, to be swallowed by something greater than the ego. But it is also to return to the primal source, to sink into the same dark waters from which all life once arose. Jung believed that these dream images tap into something beyond personal memory. They are part of the collective unconscious, the great reservoir of archetypal patterns that link every individual to the whole of humanity. For the patient who dreamed of the fish, Jung did not dismiss the fear. He acknowledged it. Being swallowed is terrifying, but he then reframed the fear. Inside the belly of the fish, as inside the womb, a transformation is taking place. The dreamer was not dying, but preparing for a symbolic rebirth. This reframing shifted the meaning from despair to hope, from threat to opportunity. And this is where Jung's art of decoding symbols truly begins, by seeing beyond the literal surface to the deeper, symbolic truth. As we begin this exploration together, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what images return to you again and again? Perhaps you've dreamed of falling, of searching for something lost, of walking through unfamiliar houses, or of being chased by a figure you cannot see. These images, though deeply personal, also belong to patterns recognized throughout cultures and centuries. Jung would say they are the soul's attempt to speak in a language older than words. Through his life's work, Jung taught that we are not abandoned in our dreams, nor are we left without guidance. The unconscious does not wish to torment us. It wishes to teach us, to prepare us, and to lead us toward wholeness. But it does so through riddles and pictures, through a symbolic code that requires patience, reflection, and humility to understand. In this story of the dream and the giant fish, we glimpse the opening note of a much larger symphony. The idea that symbols are not random, nor are they meaningless. They are alive, pulsing with energy, echoing with the voices of countless myths and stories that have shaped humanity. When the unconscious places a symbol before us, it is offering a message both personal and universal, a key to a door we may not even realize we need to open. Before we move further, let me invite you, as Jung often invited his own listeners, to reflect actively. Think of the last dream you can remember. Picture its strongest image, whether it was a place, an animal, a person, or even just a color or sound. Hold it in your mind, as if it were painted on a canvas. What feeling does it stir in you? Fear? Peace? Curiosity? That emotion is the first clue to its meaning. Symbols rarely whisper in monotone. They speak through the heat of our feelings, through the intensity of our reactions. As you hold that image, consider this. You are not alone in experiencing it. Throughout history, others have seen similar pictures in their dreams and myths. A snake, a storm, a mountain, a journey into darkness. These motifs weave across humanity's imagination, recurring again and again. Jung called them archetypes, and to him, they were the deepest structures of the human soul. The story of the fish swallowing the dreamer echoes the biblical tale of Jonah, who was swallowed by a whale and carried into the depths for 3 days before being released, transformed, with a new mission. It echoes countless myths of heroes who enter the belly of a monster only to emerge reborn. By connecting the patient's dream to these ancient stories, Jung showed that personal suffering is never only personal. It is part of a larger human drama, a shared journey toward meaning. In this way, Jung's art of decoding symbols is not about fortune-telling or simple interpretation. It is about relationship. It is about creating a bridge between the individual and the eternal. When we begin to understand our dreams symbolically, we stop seeing them as random noise and start experiencing them as messages from a deeper part of ourselves. Now, as we step into the next stage of this exploration, remember the opening image of falling into the ocean and being swallowed whole. Let it linger in your imagination, not as a nightmare to flee from, but as an invitation to enter the symbolic world. For in that world, every image is a doorway, every dream a map, every symbol a voice calling us toward growth. In the sections that follow, we will dive deeper into Jung's vision of why symbols are the soul's true language and how they can be read step by step. We will see that decoding symbols is not a dry intellectual exercise, but a living dialogue between the conscious and unconscious mind. For now, let this thought settle. When the unconscious speaks in symbols, it does so with purpose. And if you can learn to listen, you may discover that your most confusing dreams are in fact your soul's clearest messages. Why is it that symbols, and not ordinary words, carry the deepest truths of the unconscious? Carl Jung believed it is because the psyche speaks in images long before it speaks in language. Words are inventions of consciousness, tools forged by cultures and societies to communicate ideas. But symbols, those strange shapes and recurring images that emerge in dreams and visions, come from a much older source. They are the natural language of the soul. They do not describe, they reveal. They do not argue, they present themselves in living form. When Jung listened to his patients recount their dreams, he noticed something striking. Even the most ordinary people, untrained in literature or mythology, dreamed in pictures that echoed ancient stories. A man might dream of a serpent coiling around a tree. A woman might see herself in a vast desert, searching for water. A child might dream of flying over rooftops, soaring as if gravity had been suspended. These were not just random brain firings or leftovers from the day's concerns. They carried a weight, a resonance, as if the unconscious were speaking in a code written thousands of years before. Jung contrasted symbols with signs. A sign points to something specific. A red traffic light means stop. A thermometer rising means heat. Symbols, however, cannot be exhausted by a single explanation. They open outward, carrying multiple layers of meaning. The serpent can be danger, but also wisdom, healing, or renewal. The desert may suggest desolation, but also purification or revelation. A symbol lives because it grows with the dreamer, offering new meanings at different stages of life. For Jung, this quality of symbols made them bridges between the conscious mind and the unconscious depths. The ego speaks in words, logic, and concepts. The unconscious speaks in images, feelings, and archetypes. Symbols are the common language where the two can meet. When you sit with a symbol, you are allowing a dialogue to occur between these two realms of the psyche. The conscious mind begins to ask, what does this image mean? The unconscious, in response, offers associations, emotions, and intuitions. Over time, meaning emerges, not imposed by reason, but revealed by the symbol itself. Consider again the dream of the giant fish. If we treat it as a mere sign, we might reduce it to fear of death or childhood trauma. But Jung would insist on its symbolic dimension. The fish is a container of the self, a womb of transformation, an archetypal image of death and rebirth. Such a symbol could not be pinned down with a single explanation. Its meaning would continue to evolve as the dreamer's life unfolded. Years later, encountering new challenges, the dreamer might find fresh significance in the same dream. That is the richness of symbolic language. It never grows stale. The power of symbols is also emotional. Think of how a dream can stay with you for days, even years, while ordinary events vanish. That staying power comes from the symbol's capacity to touch the deepest layers of the psyche. A symbol does not just inform, it transforms. It reaches into the unconscious, stirs its hidden energies, and pulls them upward into awareness. Jung often said that when you truly encounter a symbol, you feel it. There is a weight to it, a sacredness that no rational analysis can replicate. Even outside of dreams, symbols guide our lives. Religions are built on them. The cross, the lotus, the mandala, the Star of David. Nations are bound by them, flags, emblems, anthems. Relationships thrive on them, rings, gifts, gestures. We live surrounded by symbols, though we often forget their power. Jung's insight was that the symbols which arise unbidden from dreams, visions, and creative impulses deserve the same reverence. They are not decorations of the mind. They are messages from the deepest source of our being. Jung's patients often resisted at first. It was just a dream, they would say. Why should it matter? He would remind them that symbols hold the wisdom of the unconscious, and to ignore them is to turn away from one's own inner compass. The unconscious, like a wise teacher, does not force itself into our waking life. It speaks subtly, in images and metaphors. The challenge is not whether it speaks, but whether we choose to listen. This symbolic mode of communication is also why Jung resisted purely rational medical explanations of dreams. Freud, his mentor for a time, believed dreams were largely expressions of repressed desires. Jung did not deny this possibility, but he felt it was too narrow. To reduce a dream symbol to a hidden wish was, for him, to flatten the richness of the unconscious into a simple formula. Instead, he argued that dreams were creative acts of the psyche, attempts to balance and guide the conscious mind. Symbols were the medium through which this creative act took place. Imagine trying to describe love without using any images. You might list facts, heartbeat, hormones, brain chemistry, but none of these captures the fullness of love. Now think of a poet who compares love to fire, to a river, to a storm. Those are symbols, and in them we sense truths beyond facts. The unconscious works the same way. It does not tell us, "You are overwhelmed." Instead, it shows us waves crashing on a shore, or a dam about to burst, or a storm breaking. In each image, we feel the truth, and the truth changes us. This is why Jung insisted that symbols were not dead relics, but living presences. Each time a symbol arises, it is the unconscious choosing the best way, in that moment, to communicate. A dream symbol is like a letter addressed to the dreamer, written in a language both ancient and intimate. And as with any letter, its value lies not in dismissing it, but in carefully unfolding it, reading it, and asking what it wants us to know. As you reflect on this, consider your own recurring symbols. Have you seen the same place or figure appear in more than one dream? Have you noticed certain numbers, animals, or patterns in your life that seem to follow you? These are not accidents. Jung would say they are the unconscious knocking at your door, reminding you that your life has layers yet to be discovered. The language of symbols is the soul's native tongue. To ignore it is to silence a part of yourself. To attend to it is to open a channel to wisdom that words alone cannot carry. Jung saw this as both a responsibility and a gift. The responsibility to take our inner lives seriously, and the gift of being guided by a wisdom greater than the ego's narrow vision. Having seen why symbols matter, we can now move to the practical question. How does one begin to decode them? Jung, through years of work with patients and with his own dreams, developed a 4-step method that provides a pathway into the symbolic world. It is not rigid or mechanical, but it offers a structure to help us approach the mysterious with respect and clarity. When someone brought a dream to Carl Jung, he did not rush to give an interpretation. Instead, he invited the dreamer to sit with the images carefully, as though each was a message wrapped in mystery. Over time, he developed a process, 4 steps, that allowed both patient and analyst to enter the symbolic world with respect and attention. This method was not meant to flatten the dream into one rigid meaning, but to open it up, to let it speak more fully. The 4 steps were: identify the central image, connect it to archetypes, compare it with myths and folklore, and finally, uncover the personal message it carries for the dreamer. The first step was deceptively simple. Identify the central image. Dreams often contain many details, some vivid, others scattered and confusing. But within them, there is usually one symbol that glows with greater intensity, the one that holds the emotional charge. In the dream of the deep sea, the central image is not the water alone, nor the darkness, but the giant fish swallowing the dreamer. That image carries the weight of the dream. Jung encouraged patients to focus there, to describe what they saw, how it felt, and what associations it stirred. By locating the heart of the dream, they could begin to enter its symbolic meaning. The second step was to connect that image with archetypes. Archetypes are the universal patterns of the human psyche, recurring figures, motifs, and themes that appear across cultures and eras. They live in what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared layer of the mind that unites all humanity. When the patient dreams of a fish swallowing them, Jung recalls the archetypal themes of the devouring monster, the great mother, the womb of transformation. These are not random associations. They are threads woven through mythologies, religions, and fairy tales from around the world. By linking the dream image to these archetypal patterns, Jung helped the dreamer see that their private experience was also part of a larger, timeless story. The third step was comparison with myth and folklore. Jung believed that myths were humanity's collective dreams, and dreams were our personal myths. Both speak the same symbolic language. So when a patient describes being swallowed by a fish, Jung might recall Jonah in the belly of the whale, or Pinocchio trapped in the giant sea creature, or the many hero tales in which descent into darkness precedes renewal. This step places the dream in a broader human context, showing that the dreamer is walking a path countless others have walked in symbolic form. Suddenly, the private nightmare is revealed as part of humanity's shared imagination, and this gives it dignity and depth. The fourth and final step was to uncover the personal message. After recognizing the central image, connecting it to archetypes, and comparing it with myths, Jung turned back to the dreamer. What does this symbol say to you, here and now, in your life? For one person, being swallowed by a fish might symbolize an overwhelming life event, a call to surrender to forces beyond their control. For another, it might mean the need to retreat inward, to incubate in the dark before emerging renewed. For yet another, it might point to spiritual transformation, the death of an old identity and the birth of a new one. Only the dreamer, guided by reflection and feeling, can sense which meaning resonates most deeply. Jung always emphasized, no analyst can dictate the final message. The unconscious speaks uniquely to each person, and only they can feel the truth of its words. This four-step process was not rigid. It was more like a compass than a map. Jung encouraged flexibility, reminding patients that symbols are alive, not fixed. The same image may mean different things at different times. A snake might once appear as a threat, and later as a guide. A house in a dream may one day represent security, another day confinement. What matters is not finding a single correct interpretation, but entering into relationship with the symbol, letting it unfold layer by layer. Imagine yourself applying this process. Think of a dream you once had, a vivid one, perhaps still remembered after years. First, identify the main image. Was it a place, a figure, an object, an animal? Then ask, what universal themes might this image connect to? If it was a mountain, it may symbolize the quest for spiritual ascent. If it was fire, it may represent both destruction and purification. Next, recall any myths, stories, or cultural images that echo the same theme. Finally, return to your own life. What does this image mean for me now? What is my unconscious trying to tell me through it? This method turns dream interpretation from a puzzle into a dialogue. You are no longer a passive recipient of mysterious visions. You are an active participant in uncovering their meaning. The unconscious is not a stranger, but a partner, speaking in a language you can learn to hear. By engaging with symbols, you are strengthening the bridge between conscious awareness and the deeper self. Jung found that this process often brought profound relief to his patients. What had seemed like terrifying nightmares became sources of insight. What had felt meaningless or random was revealed as purposeful. Even dark or painful symbols became more bearable once they were understood as part of a transformative journey. The unconscious was not an enemy, but a guide. In the dream of the sea and the fish, once the patient understood the process, fear turned into wonder. The giant fish was no longer a monster to dread, but a womb of renewal. Being swallowed was not death, but preparation for rebirth. The personal despair was reframed as part of the great archetypal pattern of descent and renewal. That shift changed the way the dreamer related to their own life struggles, offering hope where before there was only fear. This is the essence of Jung's art of decoding symbols, a process that takes us from chaos to meaning, from fear to transformation, from isolation to connection with the whole of humanity. It reminds us that dreams are not accidents, and symbols are not nonsense. They are the psyche's way of guiding us, teaching us, preparing us for the journey of growth. As we continue, we will see how Jung extended this idea beyond the individual dream, showing that every personal image is also a thread in the great tapestry of human symbolism. Our next step is to explore how personal symbols connect us to collective archetypes, and how through them, we discover that our private stories are always part of a larger, timeless narrative. A dream may feel like the most private experience one can have, an image arising in the silent night of your own mind, never seen or heard by anyone else. Yet Jung insisted that dreams are never merely personal. They are threads in a far greater tapestry, woven from patterns that have appeared for millennia in myths, rituals, and collective imagination. The images that visit you in sleep often echo stories told by ancient cultures, symbols carved into stone, or motifs passed down in folklore. This is the mystery of the collective unconscious, a domain Jung described as the shared reservoir of psychic images belonging to all of humanity. When a patient dreamed of the giant fish that swallowed them whole, Jung did not stop at the individual fear. He recognized in that image something universal. He remembered Jonah, who was swallowed by the whale and remained in its belly for 3 days before emerging transformed. He recalled creation myths in which gods and heroes were consumed by beasts or entered caves, only to be reborn. He saw in the patient's personal nightmare the outlines of an archetypal journey, one that countless humans before had symbolically traveled. The dreamer was not alone, but accompanied by humanity's entire mythic history. This is the power of archetypes. They connect our small lives to the vast drama of human existence. Archetypes are not inventions of culture, but innate patterns of the psyche. They are like deep riverbeds carved into the human soul, channels through which psychic energy naturally flows. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the shadow. These figures appear in every culture, though clothed in different garments. When they surface in a dream, they remind us that our private struggles resonate with ancient collective truths. Imagine the comfort this brings. A woman grieving loss dreams of being pursued by a dark figure. At first, it terrifies her. But Jung shows her that the shadow is an archetypal presence, one that has always represented the hidden, rejected parts of the self. By facing it, she is doing what heroes in every myth have done, confronting the darkness to find new strength. Her fear becomes less isolating when she realizes she is part of a universal pattern. She is walking a road humanity has always walked, and many voices echo alongside her own. This connection between the personal and the collective also gives symbols their depth. A personal image alone might seem small, but once connected to archetypes, it becomes immense, vibrating with layers of meaning. Take, for example, the symbol of the tree. To one dreamer, it may represent family roots. To another, spiritual growth. To yet another, the axis between heaven and earth. The tree is both deeply personal and eternally archetypal. It anchors the dreamer's story in the soil of humanity's shared imagination. Jung often compared this process to building a bridge. On one side stands the individual, with their private experiences, emotions, and images. On the other stands humanity's vast mythic heritage, the archetypes that have guided cultures and civilizations. The symbol is the bridge between them. By walking across it, the dreamer discovers that their personal journey is not trivial but sacred, connected to a cosmic story far larger than themselves. It is important to note that Jung did not see archetypes as abstract concepts, but as living forces. They shape behavior, inspire creativity, and appear spontaneously in art, religion, and culture. When someone dreams of a wise old man offering advice, Jung recognized the archetype of the sage or mentor. When a child draws a circle filled with radiant patterns, he saw the Mandala, an archetype of wholeness. These images do not need to be taught. They arise naturally from within. They are, in a sense, humanity's spiritual DNA, coded into the unconscious of every individual. Let us return again to the dream of the sea. The ocean itself is archetypal, representing the unfathomable depths of the unconscious. To fall into it is to lose the stability of the ego and enter the unknown. The fish is another archetypal figure, sometimes devourer, sometimes savior, sometimes womb. In Christian symbolism, the fish represents Christ, who offers renewal and salvation. In other traditions, fish symbolize fertility, abundance, or initiation. By recognizing these archetypal resonances, Jung helped his patients see that the dream was not about personal doom, but about stepping into a pattern of death and rebirth that has shaped human spirituality for centuries. This recognition transforms how we experience our own inner lives. A recurring dream of being trapped may not only reflect daily stress, but may echo the archetypal motif of descent into the underworld, the hero's initiation. A vision of a radiant figure may not only be wish fulfillment, but the archetypal appearance of the self, the central guiding force of the psyche. When we realize that our personal images resonate with humanity's oldest stories, we begin to see our struggles with new eyes, not as meaningless chaos, but as sacred participation in the eternal drama of life. Have you ever felt that a dream of yours carried more weight than you could explain? Perhaps you dreamed of fire, of flying, of wandering through a vast labyrinth. Such images are not yours alone. They are shared with countless dreamers across cultures and time. Jung would say, "Pay attention. These are signs that the collective unconscious is speaking, reminding you of your place in the great human story." This connection to the collective also explains why symbols can heal. When a patient recognizes that their private pain is echoed in myth, they no longer feel alone. They see that what they suffer is part of the human condition, and that others have endured and transformed through the same journey. Jung believed this recognition itself was deeply therapeutic, giving meaning to suffering and courage to continue. The art of decoding symbols, then, is not only about self-understanding. It is about connection to others, to culture, to history, to the deep river of humanity flowing through us all. To decode a symbol is to step into that river, to realize you are carried by currents older and stronger than yourself. In the next section, we will explore what happens when the unconscious does not send gentle or comforting symbols, but dark and frightening ones. For Jung, even the most terrifying images are not enemies to be rejected, but messengers of transformation. By facing the darkness, he taught, we discover the light that waits within it. When people first hear that symbols are the language of the unconscious, they often imagine luminous visions, comforting images, or wise figures emerging from dreams. But Jung knew that the unconscious does not always speak in gentle tones. More often, it confronts us with darkness, nightmares, monstrous figures, threatening landscapes, moments of despair or death. These frightening symbols are among the most powerful, and Jung believed they arrive with a purpose. They are not punishments, but invitations, signals that the psyche is preparing for change. By confronting the terrifying, the dreamer is being guided toward renewal. Think again of the dream of the sea and the giant fish. The first reaction is fear. Who would not panic at being swallowed whole in the depths of the ocean? Yet Jung reframed this terror as a symbolic descent, an initiation into transformation. Being swallowed meant returning to the womb of the unconscious, where the ego dissolves and a new self can emerge. To resist such a symbol is to remain trapped in fear. To accept it is to allow the unconscious to do its healing work. This principle appears throughout mythology. Heroes rarely begin their journey in light. They almost always face a descent into darkness. Orpheus journeys into the underworld. Theseus enters the labyrinth to confront the Minotaur. Jonah is swallowed by the whale. Christ descends into death before resurrection. Again and again, human stories insist on this truth. Before renewal, there is descent. Before light, darkness. Before transformation, suffering. The frightening symbol is the doorway into this pattern, and the dreamer who dares to pass through it will not remain the same. Jung encouraged his patients to sit with these dark images rather than turn away. A nightmare may wake you in terror, but if you bring it into consciousness and reflect on its meaning, it can reveal an extraordinary message. One patient described being pursued by a faceless shadow. At first, she could barely talk about it. But with Jung's guidance, she came to see the shadow as the repressed parts of herself. Anger, desire, and strength she had long denied. By turning to face the faceless figure, she discovered qualities within herself that she needed in order to grow. What had once been terrifying became a source of power. This is one of Jung's most enduring insights. What we fear in the unconscious is often what we most need to integrate. The dark figure may be the shadow, the archetype that contains everything the ego rejects. To encounter it is frightening because it forces us to confront truths about ourselves we would rather ignore. Yet without integrating the shadow, we remain incomplete. The dream, then, is an act of mercy. It brings the shadow to us so that we might finally meet it and grow. Consider also the images of death that so often arise in dreams. A person might dream of their own funeral, of skeletons, of decaying buildings, of endings. Such symbols can leave a heavy weight upon waking. But Jung taught that death in dreams rarely means physical death. More often, it symbolizes the death of an old identity, the end of a way of being that no longer serves. The unconscious shows us death so that we can let go of what has become stagnant and prepare for renewal. Death is the prerequisite for rebirth. To dream of it is to be invited into transformation. Even dreams of monsters, disasters, and destruction have this character. Jung once observed that when cultures or individuals ignore the unconscious, it grows restless and erupts in violent imagery. The psyche insists on being heard. When a person refuses to acknowledge their inner turmoil, the unconscious may present it in a dream as an earthquake, a tidal wave, or an attack by wild beasts. The image shocks the dreamer awake, forcing attention on what has long been denied. The darkness is dramatic because it carries urgency. Something must be faced now before it overwhelms the conscious life. In therapy, Jung guided people gently through these encounters. He reminded them that they were not alone in facing these symbols. Humanity has always faced them, myth after myth, ritual after ritual. When a patient felt consumed by fear, he pointed them towards stories of others who had gone into the dark and returned with treasure. The hero's journey was not just a tale in books. It was happening in the patient's own psyche. By linking their fear to humanity's collective symbols, Jung gave them courage. Their nightmare became not a curse, but a calling. For you too, this is a truth to remember. If you are confronted by a frightening symbol, it may be the most important message the unconscious has for you. A nightmare is not the enemy of peace, but the herald of growth. The monster that chases you may be carrying the very gift you need. The destruction you witness may be clearing the way for something new. The death you see may be the doorway to rebirth. Think back to your own life. Have you ever faced a time when everything seemed to collapse? Perhaps a job ended, a relationship fell apart, or a long-held belief crumbled. In the moment, it felt like disaster. But looking back, you may see that it was the beginning of a transformation, the breaking open of a path you could not have walked otherwise. The unconscious often prepares us for such times by sending symbols of destruction. It is not cruelty, it is preparation. Jung's art of decoding symbols teaches us to hold both sides of the image, the fear and the promise. To be swallowed is terror, but it is also safety within the womb. To see death is grief, but it is also renewal. To face the shadow is horror, but it is also empowerment. Every dark symbol carries within it the seed of light, and only by holding both can we see its full meaning. As we step forward, the path leads us to one of Jung's most profound discoveries: the mandala, the symbol of wholeness. While dark symbols initiate us into transformation, mandalas reveal the shape of the self we are moving toward. They remind us that even in chaos, the psyche is striving for order and unity. In the next section, we will explore how Jung saw mandalas as the geometry of the soul, maps drawn by the unconscious to guide us toward completeness. After the storms and shadows, after the descent into the depths, the psyche often offers another image, one that shines with quiet symmetry. Jung discovered that again and again in his patient's dreams and drawings, circles and radiant patterns appeared. At first glance, they seemed simple: a wheel, a flower, a starburst, a square within a circle. But Jung recognized them as mandalas, an ancient and universal symbol of wholeness. To him, the mandala was not just a picture, it was the geometry of the soul, a living map of the self. The mandala has appeared in cultures across the world, in Buddhist sand paintings, in Hindu yantras, in rose windows of cathedrals, in the circular stone carvings of indigenous traditions. Each time, the structure is similar, a balanced design radiating outward from a central point. Jung saw this as no accident. He believed that when the unconscious seeks to restore balance, it produces mandalas. They are spontaneous attempts by the psyche to create order out of chaos, to guide the conscious mind toward inner harmony. He observed that patients going through turmoil would often sketch or dream of circles without knowing why. One might doodle a wheel with spokes. Another might see a radiant garden seen from above, arranged in perfect balance. Jung noticed that these images tended to appear when the psyche was under stress, as if the unconscious were offering reassurance. Despite the outer disorder, there is an inner center that holds. The mandala says, "You are not lost. The self within you remains whole, waiting to be recognized." In this sense, the mandala is the counterpoint to the dark symbols we explored earlier. Where nightmares shock us with dissent, mandalas reassure us with integration. They remind us that transformation has a goal, not endless chaos, but new unity. To dream of a mandala, or to feel drawn to create one, is to glimpse the guiding center of the psyche. It is the soul's way of saying, all is moving toward wholeness. Jung himself experienced this. During a period of personal crisis, he recorded visions and drawings in what later became known as the Red Book. Page after page filled with mandalas, circles of color and pattern that seemed to arise unbidden from his unconscious. He did not design them consciously. They came to him. Over time, he realized they were guiding him, showing him the structure of the self, the totality that holds both light and shadow, both conscious and unconscious. The mandala became his most intimate teacher, reminding him that even in inner chaos, there is a hidden order striving for expression. For patients, Jung often encouraged the practice of drawing or painting mandalas. He found that when people engaged in this act, Their unconscious poured itself onto the page. A woman wrestling with grief might produce a mandala in dark blues and grays, with a bright center of gold. A man facing conflict might create a divided circle, half light, half shadow. Each mandala became a mirror, reflecting the current state of the psyche and its movement toward balance. Over time, as healing occurred, the mandalas often became more harmonious, more radiant, more centered. The power of the mandala is not only visual, but experiential. To gaze upon one is to feel drawn inward, toward the center. Meditation practices around the world have used mandalas precisely for this reason. They quiet the mind, focus attention, and remind the soul of its innate order. Jung saw in this a universal truth. Whether in Eastern traditions or Western dreams, the mandala serves as a compass, pointing toward the self. What does this mean for us today? It means that when you notice circular symbols in your dreams, or when you feel compelled to sketch or contemplate a circle, pay attention. The unconscious may be showing you its central truth, that beneath the surface of your conflicts and fears, there is a core of wholeness. You are not merely fragments, you are a totality, and the mandala is its image. Jung extended this insight further, seeing mandalas not only in art and dreams, but in daily life. The cycle of seasons, the turning of day and night, the orbit of planets, all are mandalas. Our very lives move in circular patterns: birth, growth, decline, and renewal. By recognizing these mandalic rhythms, we align ourselves with the deep patterns of existence. We begin to live symbolically, not just practically. We see that every ending curves back into a new beginning. Every loss circles into renewal. Every descent rises again into light. In his writings, Jung described how the mandala represents the archetype of the self, the organizing principle of the psyche that seeks unity. While the ego often clings to control, the self works quietly, weaving the fragments of our lives into a larger whole. To dream of a mandala is to glimpse this greater self, reminding us that our journey is guided not by chaos, but by an inner order older than our conscious awareness. Think of how this insight changes our relationship to struggle. The dark dreams of death, monsters, or drowning may shake us, but when a mandala appears, it reassures us that the journey has a destination. We are not wandering endlessly. We are moving toward integration. The mandala says, everything belongs. The pain, the fear, the joy, the hope, all are being gathered into a whole. The unconscious is not seeking to destroy you, but to make you complete. And so, in the arc of Jung's symbolic decoding, we arrive at a profound truth. Every symbol, whether dark or radiant, whether terrifying or beautiful, is part of the soul's journey toward wholeness. Symbols are not random accidents. They are messages guiding us toward integration. The nightmare of being swallowed and the vision of a glowing mandala are not opposites, but companions. Together, they reveal the path: descent, confrontation, transformation, and finally, the restoration of balance. As we draw this journey to its conclusion, remember the first image with which we began: the dreamer swallowed by the giant fish. What seemed a nightmare was revealed as the first step toward rebirth. Now, after traveling through Jung's method of decoding symbols, after exploring archetypes, shadows, and mandalas, we see the deeper pattern. Every dream is a doorway, every symbol a guide, every descent a preparation for renewal. In the final reflection, we will gather these threads into one vision: how to live a symbolic life. For Jung, decoding symbols was not only something done in therapy or dreams, it was a way of being, of listening daily for the unconscious whispering through images, patterns and signs. To live symbolically is to walk in constant dialogue with the deeper self, allowing it to guide you toward wholeness.